Welcome to Property Law 101. I'm Sara Bronin, and I created the series to help you understand the basics of property law. As you know, this series covers 4 fundamental questions about property and property law, and today we're talking about the third question, which is using property. So there are a few alternatives to Euclidean zoning, which we have discussed in other videos. These alternatives are emerging in localities on a case by case, sometimes people say experimental basis. Performance zoning codes are one of these. They say, for example, that a builder has to build something that affects traffic in a certain way, that has a certain density impact, or that gives off only a certain amount of noise. So performance zoning establishes standards that builders have to meet. Another alternative, the one we'll focus on today, is a form-based code. It graphically defines the kinds of buildings that a certain jurisdiction might want, by form, not necessarily by use. These types of codes have been adopted by dozens of local jurisdictions across the country, primarily over the last 2 decades. Their key components, or key proponents rather, initially were the new urbanists. This is a group that critiques use-based codes as having negative effects. In another video, we discuss one of the effects of strict use-based codes, exclusionary zoning. There's also the issue that overly strict codes deaden neighborhood vitality. Historically, we used to intermingle residential and non-residential uses and mix an array of uses. And those communities that developed organically were much stronger and more vibrant, more feet on the street, perhaps more interesting than the very use restricted neighborhoods that we see today. Today, form-based codes identify building types that are acceptable in certain neighborhoods. Very often, these codes coexist with traditional zoning. That means they also have use-based provisions that regulate the type of uses that can take place within the districts in which you're also specifying building types. Hartford, Connecticut, where I've worked on the zoning code, has a citywide form-based code. We developed the code in 3 parts, and I just talk about all 3 today. First, we went to the community to determine what kinds of buildings we had. We surveyed the community. We have, as you might predict, very tall buildings downtown, medium scale housing in many of the neighborhoods, and freestanding single family housing in a few other neighborhoods. So we cataloged every building type in the city. Then we took those building types, second step, went out into the community and asked that community members opine on which types of buildings they wanted to see more of. Of course, zoning only regulates prospective development. Most people said they did not like the types of buildings that were oriented to cars, not just buildings that came in the form of gas stations or car washes, but even strip malls where there's shopping with parking in the front. Instead, on neighborhood main streets and our commercial corridors, we learned that most people like the types of buildings that we built historically, 2 to 4 story buildings with retail on the ground floor and allowing a mix of uses. So based on that second step, the community's input on the building codes, we set out in the zoning code parameters for different building types. And in adopting the code, we set out a number of very specific architectural rules. So for example, the code says that front doors should be on the front of buildings. It put garages behind housing. It banned those strip malls that people really didn't like. It confirmed that neighborhood main streets had to have buildings of at least 2 stories. And of course, it allows the tallest buildings in the downtown area and in the transit-oriented development districts. So that is just one example of form-based coding based on Hartford. And you can read more about that specific example in an article I've uploaded to SSRN for free download called Comprehensive Rezonings. It describes Hartford's process, and it also describes more about the value of a form-based code. So I'll leave it there. I will look forward to connecting with you on Twitter or through my website, and I hope to see you next time.